With regard to sexuality, you said that it is a good question to ask yourself, who is in control? Well, yeah, that's the question, isn't it? You know, if you're masturbating to pornography and the consequence of that is an immediate influx of guilt, then you have to ask yourself, who's in control?
In this discussion, Jordan Peterson delves into the profound impact of pornography on individuals and their sense of self. He challenges us to question who is truly in control when engaging in behaviors like pornography and masturbation, especially when these actions are followed by feelings of guilt and shame. Peterson explores how these habits can undermine one's life, making it difficult to live authentically and fully. By understanding the deeper psychological and ethical implications, Peterson offers guidance on how to break free from these damaging patterns and build a more meaningful and fulfilling life.
And that's a really important question, who's in control. That's what terrified me about developing some psychoanalytic acumen, because once you realize that you're a house that many spirits can and do inhabit, and that many of them aren't you, and that many of them aren't working towards the purposes you might want yourself to be working to, and that's the realization of the myth that you're embodying from the Jungian perspective. It's a very, very serious question. The fundamental human myth is Cain versus Abel. And so who are you? Are you Cain or Abel? Well, the answer is you're both. And then the question is, well, who's got the upper hand? And then the next question is, who do you want to have the upper hand? Is it God and Abel or Satan and Cain? And that's a question that's just as germane to non-believers as it is to believers. And isn't that remarkable and appalling and overwhelming and terrifying all at the same time, if you have any sense of what it means? So if your behavior is embarrassing you, well, there's only two possibilities, isn't there? You shouldn't be so embarrassed. And I suppose the voice that says yes to all expression of human sexuality would say that your guilt and shame is merely the detrimental hangover of an oppressive patriarchy that's judgmental in its attitudes towards sexuality. If your sexual behavior isn't an expression of your highest being, then it isn't serving you in the deepest sense. You're serving it. And that's what your shame indicates. So get out there and find a partner and commit to her or him.
In this segment, Jordan Peterson discusses the pervasive issue of pornography, even among those in committed relationships. He explains that pornography is a poor substitute for genuine intimacy and sexual connection, which requires courage, honesty, and vulnerability. Peterson emphasizes that a truly fulfilling sexual relationship involves openly sharing desires with a committed partner, often best achieved within the bonds of marriage. He highlights that a committed relationship allows for the mutual revelation of desires, leading to a deeper, more meaningful connection.
One of the reasons that pornography is so rampant, even among people who are in relatively permanent relationships, is that it's a bad approximation to a good art, right? Is that people's sexual longing is deep and plastic, and it takes an awful lot of courage to make what it demands consciously apprehensible and communicable, and to share that desire with the person that you love. That's the true revelation of nakedness. That's another way of thinking about it, because what else would that be? But if you dare to do that, you might find out that you can encourage an active partner in play, and that will provide you with what you need and want within the confines of a relationship that also simultaneously provides you with everything else you need and want. And that's a pretty good deal. And so, how do you occupy an ethical position and keep the erotic tension in your relationship? Well, one answer to that is, well, that's why you get married. Like, that's the answer to that, right? Because the marital vow, which is a vow of permanence and a vow of mutual reciprocity, and a vow to stay together regardless of the storms that are coming, means that you have enough of a commitment to ethically justify the mutual revelation of your nakedness. That's a good way of thinking about it. And that's a good deal too. And it can be an adventurous deal if you can admit to yourself what you want and need. You know, there's a gospel line, which is a strange thing to quote in this context. It's, knock and the door will open, ask and you will receive, seek and you will find. And I would say that is just as true on the sexual front within a marriage as it is on any other front in the more classic, let's say, on the more classical ethical horizon. Properly integrated sexual life is part of the highest ethical endeavor, and there's nothing wrong, and in fact very much that is right in allowing yourself to realize what you need and want and determining how to share that with a partner who is also pursuing exactly the same thing.
Peterson urges reducing porn and masturbation, highlighting how they undermine self-worth and motivation by offering fleeting pleasure at the cost of deeper, meaningful connections. Instead, he recommends focusing on building a more fulfilling life.
And do you have any advice on what to do with porn and masturbation? The less porn, the better. That's my advice. But let's make that more specific. To the degree that use of porn and masturbation is undermining your sense of yourself and providing you with a dearth of motivational reasons to get out there and engage with a real partner, then it's definitely not in your best interest, and that's what your conscience is telling you. You know, and it's the expedient at the expense of the meaningful. Obviously, right? Obviously, there isn't any more obvious manifestation of the expedient at the expense of the meaningful than pornography and masturbation. And that's hardly a heroic path. So maybe the less of it, the better. What advice would you give to someone looking to quit porn? I would say, it isn't that you're trying to quit porn. It's not the right way to think about it. The right way to think about it is that you're trying to figure out how to have a better life. And so you have to figure out, well, I would say do the future authoring program and keep your porn addiction in mind and think. So in the first part of the future authoring program, it asks you a bunch of questions about what your life could be like in 3 to 5 years if you took care of yourself like you were someone that you cared for. And then it asks you questions about your friends and your family and your career and your time outside of work and your health and, you know, the important dimensions of life. And it asks you to spend 20 minutes writing about how good your life could be in 3 to 5 years if you got your act together and did what was good for you. And then it asks you to write about the hell you could be in if you didn't. And so I would say you really need to do that, because porn isn't the issue. The issue is that you're not living your life the way you want to. And so you need a vision of life that's more compelling than the porn, and you need a counter vision too that frightens you, you know, because otherwise porn is obviously extraordinarily gratifying in the short term, but you seem to be suffering from the medium to long-term consequences of its use. And so you need a story that you can tell yourself that's really deeply thought through about why this is not appropriate for you, how it's hurting you, and how it's minimizing you and perhaps making you embarrassed and ashamed and more socially isolated and all of that. So I would say, think about it as cleaning up your psyche and your behavior rather than merely stopping porn. You also might want to write down, and you could do this in the negative vision part of the future authoring program. You got to write down everything bad that you think porn is doing to you, because obviously you have some suspicions that this is not good for you, right? That it's actually harming you in some important way. And so you need to be fully cognizant of what those ways are and then take them seriously and decide if that's the pathway through life on which you wish to travel. And so, and then I would also say good luck to you. You know, it's a very good idea to identify one of your weaknesses and work on it. You can strengthen yourself substantially by doing it.
Peterson advises against focusing solely on quitting porn, suggesting instead that you aim to build a better life overall. He recommends using the Future Authoring Program to envision a fulfilling future and understand the negative impacts of porn on your life. By developing a compelling vision for your life and addressing the root causes of your behavior, you can make meaningful changes and overcome your addiction.